Well, I hope everybody had some great discussions. The panelists that you've heard from, excuse me, I'm a little sick, are some of my favorite scholars. They're people who have been doing this for many, many years, publishing in our top journals, and so they're who better to learn from in these experiences. In some of our closing remarks, excuse me, I wanted to call attention to the fact that we are a global community of scholars. It's really incredible to see how many people from all around the world signed up for the conference. I really do enjoy seeing when people introduce themselves and where they're from. It's really exciting to see that qualitative researchers are everywhere. And while this is, most of us, I think, are management and organizational scholars. We span many different disciplines, and even in organizational scholarship, we're very interdisciplinary. So qualitative methods come from a whole host of disciplines and interdisciplines. We know that in some of the literature, there's been somewhat of an attack on qualitative methods regarding issues of rigor and replicability. I really appreciated some of the comments that were discussed in the last panel about the notion of subjectivity, which I'll talk about in a second. But we have to realize that we cannot apply the same standards to qualitative methods as we do quantitative methods. And now that might get a little bit messy when you're talking about mixed methods, but qualitative research in particular is really not about causal identification or theory testing. It's really about theory building and development. So we have to keep that in mind when we're thinking about how we're conducting qualitative research, how we're writing it up, how we're publishing it, and so forth, and how we're responding to it, to whether it's, we've talked a lot about publishing, but also in how we're talking about it to the world around us. What's super exciting, and I think we heard this across all of the panelists and in the plenary and across the board in this session, is that qualitative research really can help provide an engaged mechanism for research. Right. One thing about Northeastern is we tout our use-inspired research, and qualitative research really speaks to that and really can help solve grand challenges and allow us to have a deeper understanding of what some of these grand challenges are. I really liked what Lindsay had to say about, can I write an op-ed about this? Am I doing some research that people really care about, that people want to hear about? And also, does the world need me to do it? And so I think those are important questions to think about and lend itself really nicely to qualitative research. Just some key takeaways. I tried to take some notes as I was listening to the panelists, some things that I picked up on that I thought were really insightful in the first panel, really about mixed methods. And this idea, I've never really thought about it as full cycle research that have both theoretical and empirical insights, and that you can kind of go back and forth between different methods of either different types of qualitative methods or between qualitative and quantitative methods. I loved what Mike and others had to say about really needing to be strong if you're going to do a mixed methods study, that one can't be a substitute for the others. Or I think Siobhan said this, don't use one method to heal the sickness of another. I thought that was really insightful because I see that a lot too in my capacity as an editor or when I've been reviewing papers. It just feels sometimes that one method was tacked on to the other just to, maybe seem like the research was more robust. But just because you have mixed methods doesn't mean it's going to be any more robust. I loved what all the panelists, Aruna mentioned this first, I think, about having the right research team in place. Right, especially if you're doing mixed methods, you have to have the qualifications. Maybe, if I do this a lot too, my strength is in qualitative methods, but if I'm adding a quantitative component, I will reach out to someone that has that expertise. I also loved what all of the panelists said on the first panel about targeting journals, making sure editors, and even that there's a review team. Now, you don't know who all the reviewers are, but you know who the editorial board members are. So really checking that out before you submit a paper and understanding first if that journal or there are editors that will support mixed methods. And do they have the skill set? Do the reviewers on those journals have that skill set? Siobhan, I think, talked about not confusing mixed methods with triangulation. I thought that was a really important point. And she also mentioned this idea, I'm summarizing a little bit too much at too much of a high level, but she said clarifying, justifying, identifying, explaining, elaborating, integrating, and showing your approaches as you're doing mixed methods. But I think that speaks to any kind of research that you're doing, but particularly to qualitative methods. And I loved her comment about staying strong and carrying on, because even the top editors in our field that we heard from today, you know, they struggle with these challenges as well. On the best practices panel, you know, I loved what Matt had to say about gaps versus theoretical puzzles. You know, one thing I know I've struggled with personally is, do you start with context or theory? Sometimes it makes sense to do one versus the other, or start with one versus the other. So that's something to really consider as you're writing up your qualitative findings and your methods. Showing, not just telling, theorizing the arrows, that was an important idea that came up. Christine mentioned that, as well as Matt as well. And Christine talked about guidelines now that journals are highlighting on transparency and qualitative methods, and quantitative methods as well. I know a lot of people have questions about, you know, is it okay to, you know, sometimes there are, when you have interviews, for example, you know, some of that data is very proprietary. So obviously you can't put that data up on an OSF site, but there are other ways to show transparency of your methods, and I'm seeing that a lot. I know I'm doing that a lot in some of the papers that I'm writing or the papers that I'm reviewing. I'll just throw this out there because I get this question all the time because it came up. Is there a magical number of interviews? I'm missing an S there, but I don't know what the answer to that is. I think as long as you have reached a point where you feel, you know, and you're showing enough, you have enough data to show, and it's telling the story, and, you know, there's conversations. We could probably do a whole nother conference about what does it mean to have and reach theoretical saturation. So I don't think there is a magic number. It was great to hear Christine say that there may not be one. We don't know. Taking steps, or talking about the steps. She was talking about the methods section and how the data was collected and analyzed is really important. You know, Lindsay, I love the work she does, how she really deeply embeds herself in the research. And like I mentioned before, asks herself, am I publishing something that the world cares about? Could I write an op-ed about this, or an article in the New York Times that people would care about? How do I embed myself in the research and take a step back from it at the same time? I think Lindsay and Tima talked about, well, Lindsay talked specifically about looking for surprises in the field, or in the data that you've collected. I think that's really important to draw from what's surprising and novel in that research. And then lastly, I'll just again highlight what Tima pointed out about objectivity being fiction in qualitative research. It's what I started to talk about at the beginning. You know, embracing the subjectivity. I love this idea of being part of the research process. We are all part of it. You know, some people may poo-poo the idea of so-called me search, but even if it's not about something that touches you specifically personally, there's a reason why you engaged in that research process to begin with. And so embracing that subjectivity and talking about it. Back to the showing, don't telling, talking about that as you're explaining the methods, why you collected the data that you did and how it was analyzed and how your own subjectivity might influence that. So lastly, I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming today. I think at any one point in time, we had 600 or so participants. It's really wonderful to see so many people engaged and people showing up from all over the world. We're now done with the formal part of the conference. We do have an evaluation form that should pop up on your screen in the notification, so please fill that out. We really look forward to hearing the feedback. Obviously, we love the positive feedback, but if there's anything that didn't work so well, we would like to do that so we can address it for next time. And we invite you to stay on to the site. It's going to be up for the rest of the day. I think it's available for you know, long after we end this conference. So feel free to stay on the site and engage in the speed dating or roundtables. It will continue to stay open. So please explore. And just thank you. And I don't know, Stina or Gabriel, if you have anything you want to add before we close.
No, I also just want to give a big thank you to everybody for showing up and for the wonderful discussions and comments, for providing each other with links and resources to help and build this community, because together we are stronger. And by sharing all of this research and these research ideas and methods, we will be able to publish many more qualitative studies in the journals, which I think will be beneficial for organization theory for the reasons that Keisha Langley emphasized, as I was talking about in the beginning, that we need qualitative research, especially in these very turbulent times, because with these methods, we're able to ask questions like grand challenges, the growing inequality, racial tensions, the role of AI in organizations. Many of these questions cannot really be addressed very well quantitatively. So we have these tools, and together we teach each other how to use them beneficially. We can write some really great papers and hopefully move organization theory forward.
Excellent. Thank you again, everyone. We're out of time, but we really appreciate your engagement, and hopefully we'll see you next year.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Look forward to
Thank you
seeing you
all.
next year.
Bye.
Bye.